It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Friday, July 19th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is talking World Junior Summer Showcase.
World Juniors in the summer.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You could find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Instagram, Threads, Blue Sky, and Twitter as well. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. You can find our show over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, World Junior Summer Showcase is kind of the next thing in the prospect world right now, and it is taking place coming up real soon, July 28th through August 3rd at the USA Hockey Arena in Michigan, who has hosted it several times. And this is a really fun event, and it kind of gives us a taste into what the World Junior rosters could look like coming up this winter.
Yeah, for the most part. I mean, again, a couple things. So, like with Canada, Michael Meese is not there. He's not there because he wants to focus on his training. He got dinged up in the Memorial Cup, and it's his draft year. So he's like, I'm going to lay back from this. Still doesn't mean he won't be on the team. If he's ripping it up this year, he'll be on the team. So just because you're not in camp doesn't mean you won't make the team. That's one thing. The other thing is they're not going full out trying to hit each other, kill each other like they would in the regular tournament. So you have to know that when you're watching it. And so when I'm watching it, like I'm looking for just to see who got stronger, who got faster, what might fit together line wise. But I don't really hold it against anybody if they don't look great, and I don't go too high if someone's just scoring at will because maybe the goaltending's not caught up yet. It's really early in the season here. They've been off the ice for a while, so I don't get too critical one way or the other. So it's not something I would live tweet about. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like because of the timing of it, right? It's kind of smack dab in the middle of this off season where we're just far enough away from the draft and like the tournaments that led up to the draft. And then we've got a ways to go until, kids go back to school or the junior teams start up again. It's like about a month, a little over a month away from that. So it's like these kids are in the middle of their off-season training regimen.
Right.
And so it's like getting on the ice and playing a tournament like this could be a jolt to the system in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I mean, players who didn't have long playoff runs, they'll tend to have more training time and everything. And players like Michael Misa, who I said played in the Memorial Cup, had less time to do anything. So that's a factor too when you're watching players. So in my mind, I sort of course correct for things like that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think, the other thing is that, the different countries are using it for different purposes and it's not every country, right? So
No.
you look at the World Juniors and you have all the top level IIHF teams. This is just USA, Canada, Sweden, and Finland, a lot
Right.
like the Four Nations tournament that the NHL is putting on. And so it's not everybody. So you're not going to play all the top competition, but it's a tune-up. And I think the other aspect of it that's interesting is like you look at Team USA, right? Where looking at the schedule, for the first couple of games, they're split into like a split squad. So they have a USA white and a USA blue that's playing Sweden and Finland, and then it kind of inverts. But then as the tournament goes on, they're going to consolidate their roster and only have
Right.
the top guys play in the later games and against Canada especially. So they're kind of looking at this as a way to not only see what they've got, but really start trying to put this team together.
Yeah, it's one that they'll put together in pencil. They'll, the coaches kind of get to know some of the players that they don't really know, or haven't had hands-on experience with per se. And so I think it's more of that, and that's fine. But like I said, there's always going to be additions. There's players out there now from all these countries that won't make this camp that have a chance to still make these teams. So don't when you're watching, don't act as if this is definitely your team because it
Right.
not yet.
Yeah. Well, and of course we have to see how the first half of their regular seasons go and who's, playing really well and who isn't. So
Yeah, that
I,
matters too.
I think there's a lot there. There are a whole bunch of Flyers prospects in the tournament. All on 2 teams, though. There's no, Swedes or Finns as far as I could suss out on the list, in the Flyers prospect pool, but for Noah Powell, he is the lone Flyers prospect representing Team USA on this expanded roster, right? So, I'm not sure he's gonna get to play in the later games and especially against Canada, but this is a really big opportunity for him, right?
Yeah, this gets his name at least on the map with USA Hockey, and he's one of these guys that has to show. Like he has to do great. If he doesn't do great, like you said, he's not going to play in those other games. He's not going to make the team. But just the fact that he's invited there is a plus. That hey, they've noticed him, and that's
Mhm.
something. So yeah, this is from what we saw in camp, if he can carry that forward, but plus another 20%, 30% better play against better players, then maybe he'll get to play in those games. But he is a long shot.
Yeah, I think so as well, and it's, I think it is really important for him, and the way that he showed at development camp, like, really raring to go, putting everything
Hmm.
into it, I do think that being at Flyers development camp and what he was able to accomplish there will help him, because I think he'll go into this camp and go into this tournament really understanding what he needs to do and how to match up to the competition in a lot of ways, and I'm really curious to see like how much he can build on what he did at development camp.
Yeah, I mean, he's coming out of camp, coming into this hot. It's definitely going to help him. Maybe he learned a few things that he's been working on the past, couple weeks. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued to see what happens with him and where he matches up and what his line mates are and all of that going into this summer showcase. Now, Team Canada, there are 5 Flyers prospects in this squad, a lot more. Um, you know, the one I'm most interested in, to be honest, is Carson Bjarnason because I think that it was hard for us to really suss out where he is
It
at
was.
development camp, just because of the level of competition, the way the scrimmage rosters were set up. And as we know, Brandon is not a very good team. And so, like, what is he going to look like amongst the elite of his peer group? Right.
Well, I mean, presumably he'll have better players in front of him. He should, because he wasn't
Should.
on the
Yes.
best team. So that's going to be an advantage. So like that camp was just a warm up for this. That's how he's going to look at it. So this, we've got to see his best play now. If he shows his best play, he'll have a chance to make the team, because Canada is not overly deep with goaltending. So let's see what he does. I think he'll do well, but time will tell on this one.
Yeah, I think so. It'll be interesting to see. I think, for me, that's why he's the guy I'm focused on the most because he's the guy that I know the least about in terms of where he stacks up in the
Right.
competition. And I think there's some really good other goaltenders. And I think being able to compare the performances between the goaltenders of the different countries here will be useful as well. All right. There are more Flyers prospects on Team Canada, and we are going to talk about them coming up next.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers.
Continuing our discussion of Flyers prospects at the Summer Showcase, we're going to get to your poll results on Flyers players turned broadcasters later in the show. And next week on the show, we're going to start out with Flyers traded too soon, which is a topic that hurts us deeply on the inside, but it's important to talk about them, and looking forward to that. We'll have a new poll and all of that. But turning to more of Team Canada, I think a guy that's going to have a huge spotlight on him at this Summer Showcase, as well as going into World Juniors, Oliver Buck, because he is the returnee for this squad. He was on the team last year, and so he's going to be expected to take a step up in performance, in leadership, all of that, right?
Yeah, he's pretty much got a guaranteed spot unless he flopped, and he's not going to flop. So he's an important cog, like you said. The returning guys are important. The more you have, the better your chances are. So yes, he's one of the more important guys just on the entire roster, as you said. And so, from what we've seen, his defense is definitely better. His offense still a work in progress.
Yeah, I think that is going to be what I'm paying attention to, right? Is that can he step up offensively? And as the competition has leveled up around him, does his defense maintain that level of play?
Right.
And what does his complete game look like? I think that is going to be key for me with Oliver Bonk. We cannot have a conversation about Oliver Bonk without mentioning Denver Barkey in the same sentence. They are inextricably tied together for the rest of eternity. But I think, Denver Barkey, I believe, was invited to the camps for Team Canada last year, but just didn't make the
He
final
was
cut.
cut. Yeah.
Yeah, and we had thought that maybe there's been an injury, and we thought maybe he would get that spot, but he didn't, and so he just wound up, just being basically the last cut before Team Canada's final roster was named last year. And I feel like that's got to have a huge impact on a player, and you want to take this opportunity as kind of like a clean slate. This is the year, and he's really got to make his mark.
He does. He's not a guarantee to make the team. It depends what the coaching staff is looking for, how the fit of players is. So he's going to have to really bend their arm and make them want him. And so, yeah, basically what we saw in camp, he's got to do that against much better players with Team Canada for the most part. They're elite players. So he's really going to have to show it. And you're right. I still think he has a pretty good chance of making it, but nothing's ever guaranteed, especially with Canada. So he really has to have a great camp.
Yeah, and I'm just wondering, if we'll be able to kind of get a glimpse into what, it might look like for him based on his line mates, based on where he is in the lineup there. Because, you look at the list of guys invited for Team Canada, and this is going to be a top tier squad. I think with Team USA, it's a little bit harder to suss it out just because they have such a big group initially invited, and we won't really know until they narrow it down a little bit later. But with Team Canada, I think that is going to be a little bit more indicative of what their winter roster could look like. And Barkey is kind of in a very interesting spot there.
Yeah, he's not uncommon skill set wise to what they have. If he were, he would almost be a lock. But since he's not, he's going to have to say, well, prove that he's better than player X, and this is why. So that's he's still got a tough road.
Yeah, I think so as well. And, there's a ton of guys there, but we'll see who gets in these different games and how many games, and again, like I said, who he is playing with. And then there are some other Flyers prospects on the team. Carter Sotheran, I think, is really interesting, just because he's been kind of teetering on the edge of maybe being something, but hasn't quite gotten there yet. So,
Yeah.
what do you think earned him this invite? And like, does he even have a shot?
Yeah, you know, everybody who gets invited has a shot. I mean, there's no question about that. I think they've seen his play, they've seen his numbers. Uh, he's 6'3", so they've seen that. So they're like, all right, if we could get a bigger offensive guy, or if he's gonna try and play a shutdown role as a bigger guy, let's see if he could do that in this camp. So he really, he has to really prove it. Otherwise, he may not even be playing in those final games. But he has to really show that. Yeah, he's a bit of a long shot, but you're there, so you have a chance. You can't make the team. Well, you can make the team if you're not there, if you're a huge name or an amazing talent, like you said, that
Right.
has an amazing first half. But for the most part, if you don't get invited, your chances go down a lot.
Right. And, I think you look at some of the other defensemen that were invited, Bonk included, like you figure Bonk has a guaranteed spot there. Other guys that just got drafted, that are the year behind you now. Sam Dickinson is going
Yeah,
to be there. Tanner Molendyke
yeah,
will be there. Zane Prake will be there. Just some like big names. Carter Yakimchuk, like from this most recent draft. I think that it's going
yeah.
to be
Trying to
tough
hang with those
competition.
guys is going to be hard. There's no question. So,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying. Maybe maybe he's going to have to be the shutdown guy because none of those guys are. So, you know, maybe that's going to have to be his role for this. Sometimes you have to play a role to make it.
Yeah. Looking at last but most certainly not least for the Flyers is Jet Luchenko, our first round draft pick from this past NHL draft, is on the list of forwards that was invited to the summer showcase. And I think like this is a time for him. I think at development camp, sure, there's a ton of pressure on him because he was that number one draft pick. But at the same time, the level of competition just wasn't there for him. Where, as totally different, this is a huge opportunity, but also a lot of top competition. And he's got to kind of up his game a little bit. Again, a lot of the top draft picks from this past year and the year before all in one place for Team Canada. Like, what does he have to show here?
He's got to show that he could play somewhere in the top nine because he's really not a fourth liner. Uh, but yeah, he's going to go up against Caden Lindstrom and Tisha Ginla and Beckett Seneca. And just because you got drafted in the first round doesn't mean you're going to be in the same stratosphere as those guys now because he's younger. So he's got it's stacked up against him. Like Cole Bodwin, he's the perfect fourth liner as an example. So
Right.
he's going to be there for that. Um, I mentioned some of those other guys, and then you also have Matthew Wood,
Like
who's a
Berkeley
big
Cat
guy,
and
Cat and Celebrini. So his best chance is to make it as a third line player. Like that would be his best chance. And again, I don't know. Like it's just a lot of guys. So he'll have to really, really stand out, or he's just not going to make it. And I would say he's a, you know, 40% chance of making it. A lot of times because of the age too. They don't, it's really hard to make it as a younger player. And there's just so many guys here. Like it's just, even guys like Callum Ritchie who had a great year. And, I don't think Romani will make it, but Riley Height is a really good player. Easton Cowan was tremendous last year. Like it's just a big stacked roster. So if nothing else, maybe he could be one of those guys that if somebody gets hurt, they may call him. But this list is so diverse that if he doesn't grab them right away, he's probably not playing in those later games.
Right. And the good news for him is that he is young, like he's not
Yes.
even 18 yet.
No.
So this tournament will be over before he turns 18. So I think that,
He
we
gets
know
more
he
kicks at
has,
the can.
he does. He'll have like another year next year to make Team Canada. And I think, that's the year that you're really focused on for World Juniors, not this upcoming World Juniors for him. That if he's
Yeah.
borderline, like I kind of predict a similar situation about what happened to Denver Barkey is that he's
Yep.
going to be a borderline guy and they're just Hockey Canada is going to Hockey Canada and make
Yep.
some weirdo decision and shut him out. That is my prediction.
Yeah, I
But
mean, it's not far-fetched. I mean, that's
yeah,
probably the likelihood, and that'll give him something to shoot for next year. So, yeah, he's just gotta show his best, but yeah, he's not like one of those guys where you'd say he's really got a shot to be in the top 6. No. He can't even play in the top 6 right now.
right. And so, like, I would not be concerned if he doesn't eventually make the roster for
No.
World Juniors this year, but I do think he has to have a good showing at this summer showcase.
Yeah, he definitely has to have a good showing just to show he belongs and prove he belongs. He'll have his year this year. He'll have a very good year again with Guelph. But this is more of a proving thing that even going back and playing with Guelph and getting bigger numbers, because this is playing with guys that are at that level where, you know, you're at the this is the next level of elite competition for your age group. Not everybody, because obviously it's just Canada, but a large percentage for forwards.
Yeah, I think that's really what we have to pay attention to. But I'm
Yes.
excited. Again, it's coming up soon at the tail end of the month into the first week of August. And I will be watching as much as we possibly can as possible on streaming. But in the
As an
meantime,
example, I was just gonna say another thing for him that could be a chance is like maybe, San Jose says Celebrini can't go. He's too important to our team. He can't go. Things like that. If that happens with 3 or 4 players, then maybe he's got a shot. I do want to point that
sure.
because that's very possible.
Yep, I think so. All right, coming up next, we are going to talk about our weekly survey on X Flyers players turned broadcaster and who was your favorite. We're going to do that coming up next. It's summer, which always makes me think of baseball, and especially with our Philadelphia Phillies being a ton of fun this season, I want to be there in person as much as possible. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, which makes getting those tickets faster and easier. And prices on Game Time actually go down the closer it gets to first pitch. With killer last minute deals, the view from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying those coveted MLB tickets in your town, the summer concerts, and so much more. My favorite part of the Game Time app is that it's great for getting notified about last minute flash deals, and they let you save even more with zone deals, where you pick a section and let Game Time choose the seat for you. Best of all, they have all in pricing, so there's no surprise fees at checkout, and your tickets are sent directly to your phone so you never have to dig through email. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem with the code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. So we had Jim Jackson on the show earlier this week. If you haven't listened to it, I would suggest doing so. It was so much fun, and he had some really great stories to tell us.
Yeah, he's a great storyteller.
So, in that vein, we set up this week's poll to be about ex Flyers players who then made the jump to broadcasting and who your favorite was. And we tried to make it about like who your favorite was as a broadcaster, not as a player. And so, taking a look at the results of the poll, man, it is a little bit closer than I thought it was going to be, but
Yeah,
I do believe that the person I thought was going to take it did in the end. Bill Clement with 39% of the vote. Man, he was so good in the booth.
he was, and he's more infamous too. If you want to look up that game where he got kicked off of ESPN, it's on Google. We're not going to get into it all here, but yeah,
Right.
I I figured he would have the edge, and I don't think Keith Jones would argue it either.
Yeah, I don't know. I think with Bill, I just feel like I learned the game a lot from Bill Clement. That's
Yeah, he was one of
kind of
those first guys that really didn't talk down to you, but really explained things and just had really a great exuberance for the job. Like he wasn't just like an ex-player just kind of going through the motions. He really, really enjoyed what he was doing. And it really came across. Very intelligent too.
yeah, absolutely. And I think that, he really, at least for me, set the bar for what a good hockey broadcaster should be like. And, in second place, 36%, only 3% off, very close, was Keith Jones. And I think, Keith Jones was a player that when he initially made the jump to broadcasting, a lot of people kind of turn their heads a little bit and like, I don't know, Keith Jones, really?
Well, I think because they were going by what they were hearing on the morning show in
Yeah,
Philly, and that was, a part of his personality. But he learned his craft. Like he worked hard at it, and he was very good. And he would,
yeah,
like, I would always see him on the road, and we would talk about, what's going on with the Flyers or the team or whatever, or the game that we were at. And he was always very plugged into those things. And so that's how I knew he was good at his job. Like I knew he was really into it. He wasn't just like getting ready for the broadcast a half hour beforehand.
yeah. And I think, one of the things that was actually mentioned when he got the job in the front office is that he continued to like educate himself on the game
Yeah.
and to have a lot of context in teams around the league and with broadcasters around the league so that he really knew about the opposing teams coming into any particular game. And I think his just league wide knowledge is what made him so appealing as the color guy.
Yeah. I mean, I like again, I'd see him in the press box. He'd be like, "What do you think about this game?" And he would do that with a lot of people. And I think that would help. Like you said, if something would come up, he'd be like, "Oh, you know what? Mentally note that maybe I should use that on the broadcast," that kind of stuff. So I think that's how you get that kind of information is by asking a diverse amount of people what they think about,
Yep.
the matchups and stuff. And that's smart to do.
Yep. So I think he really brought a lot to the table, and is clearly an ambitious person with a lot of goals, who sets the bar high for himself. And I think, he did that as a broadcaster. So it was good to see him in second place here. In third place, Brian Boucher. I think that we talked with JJ about working with a goaltender and how goalies have a perspective that nobody else on the ice does, and he
Hmm.
brings that to the broadcast booth. And I think that's what's made him successful, and that he is on national broadcasts in addition to the Flyers broadcast, and he brings that level of smarts and that perspective.
Yeah, I think he's gotten better each year too. I think he's refining his game each year. I think there's a little bit more that he has to give, and so he's not really at the level of the other guys yet. It's almost unfair because they all were doing it longer, right? Even Keith Jones was probably doing it longer, not a lot longer, but longer even than Boucher, and Clement way longer. So he's got time to work up the list.
Yeah, I think so as well. And interestingly enough, another guy that it kind of bums me out, he didn't get as many votes, but I understand time happens, and people who are younger don't have as much experience or memory of listening to Gary Dornhofer. But again, a player that I would not have pegged as a really good broadcaster, but he just made Flyers broadcast so much fun, so entertaining. But he also knew his stuff.
He knew his stuff. He and his wife really behind adopting greyhounds, and so I was at a greyhound event where we both were there with our families with greyhounds, sitting on like I think we were sitting on towels talking about greyhounds and hockey, and so it was kind of a unique thing. But I understood who Gary Dornhofer was and how good he was, and good as a player and good as a broadcaster. But again, yeah, there's a generation that just doesn't know him.
Yeah, that is important. And man, Brian Prop can't catch a break, because we talked about him already this week in terms of
You
not
feel
getting
bad.
his due with the Flyers. not getting his due here either with only 1%
And
of the
such a
vote.
nice
But
guy. He would always have people
uh,
following him through the press box, giving these tours, talking to everybody about these things, and people would get a real thrill out of it. I remember seeing Prop do that many, many times, and so yeah, he needs to get a break soon.
yeah, and as somebody who for many, many years built their entire personality around defending Brian Propp getting destroyed in the playoffs by Chris Chelios. And Chris Chelios is the only person on this planet that I can say I truly hate. And it is because of that hit on Brian Propp. And so I have a special place in my heart for Brian Propp, and I would like to give him extra love here as well because I think he was an incredible player for the Philadelphia
Really a great
Flyers.
player. He was.
Just such a joy to watch, and then did a really great job in the booth as
Yep.
well. So
He was good at
there,
everything.
yeah, there is that. I think one of the comments we got asked why Scott Hartnell wasn't one of the selections. Love Scott Hartnell. He's so new that I feel
He
like he
is.
needs a little bit more time to cook before
Yes.
we want to compare him to any of these guys. So we were doing Scott Hartnell a favor here, I
We
think.
were. We were.
But we do love him, and I think he's made great strides already as a broadcaster. So
I think so too.
I think he's got a really good career ahead of him for sure. But that will do it for today's show. Thanks so much for listening. We'll be back on Monday with a new poll, our nemesis of the week, and the Flyers that got away. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got mailbag questions, let us know on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great weekend, everyone.